Good morning, Morai V'Rabotai. We are continuing on Masechet Succah, and we are on Daf Yutet Amud Aleph, 4 lines down from the top of the Amud. Today's Amud is being learned as a Zechut Refuah Shlema for Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid, Nisim Ben Miriam, Esther Bracha Bat Chaya. That should all have full recovery, Refuah Shlema Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. We started a complex and beautiful sugya of what types of walls that are imaginary, that are not real walls coming down, can we or cannot we rely on when it comes to machloket amoraim between Abaye and Rava. So we had a scenario in which you have a balcony around the courtyard, which we call achsadra. You have a wider achsadra than 4 amot, so you cannot use the good old concept of dofanakuma, and yet Abaye seems to say that you could use just a schach, drop a schach on top of this achsadra, and you're good to go. Where are your walls? The walls of the chaser you cannot use because there's no dofanakuma. It's wider than 4 amot. So what are your walls? Says Abaye, no problem. You have piatikra yored vesotim. The width of the balcony itself is extended downwards. We mentioned this before. The Rashi says this works with the concept you're familiar with of good achit mechitzata, that we extend the mechitzah downward, and that's your schach. And Rava said, no, you can't say it. You need actual walls. If you have psimin, if you have beams going up, poles going up, that hold up the balcony, and the poles are less than 3 tfachim apart, then we say lavuda korteron. That's the machloket. The Gemara wanted to suggest that perhaps this is an older machloket already from the first generation of Amoraim between Rav and Shmuel. Because we have this similar machloket to this in Masechet Shabbat, where you have an achsadra in the middle of nowhere, no buildings, no walls, it's just like a chuppah, like a canopy. Right, 4 poles, a top frame, and on top of it there's the ceiling. And Rav says you could carry inside this achsadra on Shabbat, no problem. Even though that the area outside is Carmelit, and you should not be able to carry more than 4 amot or more. But here you could carry the whole achsadra because we assume that the piatikra is closing down, piatikra yored vesotem, and therefore you're good to go. Right? This is Rav and Shmuel says, no, you cannot do that. So Gemara says, oh, well, this is very similar to our machloket, right? Because Abaye, who says that we assume the wall is coming down, seems like Rav, and Rava seems like Shmuel. Gemara says, no. You can't say that because Shmuel, who in Hilchot Shabbat says that this is not considered a wall, most definitely would hold that here you also cannot consider this a wall, because if it can't give me a mechitzah, a regular wall, it certainly cannot give me a house. Sukkah is supposed to be a house, right? Teshvaken taduru. So it says both Abaye and Rava agree that according to Shmuel in Masechet Sukkah there's nothing to talk about. The whole machloket of Abaye and Rava is according to Rav. Abaye says that according to Rav, that on Shabbat you could do, you could carry inside this canopy, inside this achsadra, you could also do it in Sukkah. And Rava says, no, even according to Rav, who in Masechet Shabbat allows this, in Masechet Sukkah, Rav would never allow it. Why? Because it's good only for making a mechitzah, when the mechitzah is made for inside. In that case in Masechet Shabbat, when you make the canopy is made for the area beneath it, right? So piatikra, this ledges coming down, would be protecting that area inside. So that makes sense. Maybe you could have an imaginary wall of that nature. But if in our case, the ledge of the achsadra, of the balcony, is we wanted to serve the outside area of the courtyard, not the area beneath the balcony itself, achsadra itself. So that, nobody agrees that would be the case, right? That's where we left this off yesterday. So it says...
Can I just ask, so when you have this like chuppah in the middle of nowhere, and Rav considers that you can carry inside. Does there have to be some ledge to have good achis to come?
Yes, we'll see that actually in just a moment, right? So says the Gemara, Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, V'chen ha-chasera mukefet achsadra. We learned that a chaser mukefet achsadra. This is a question, a kasha on Abaye, a powerful kasha on Abaye. Says the Gemara, we learned in the Mishnah that a chaser, a courtyard that is surrounded with a balcony, could be a kosher sukkah only if the balcony is less than 4 amot wide. And you could use dofan akuma, right? Which the Mishnah by definition is telling me, the moment that this becomes wider, the balcony becomes wider than 4 amot, and I no longer have dofan akuma, the whole thing is invalid. It's not kasher. You cannot have a case of achsadra that the achsadra is wider than 4 amot, and it will be a kasher sukkah in the middle. That would be the clear mashmaut of the Mishnah. So says the Gemara, V'chen chasera mukefet achsadra v'amai, nema piat tikra yored v'sod. According to Abaye, why wouldn't it be good? Let just the ledge be assumed to come down, and those are your walls. In other words, who cares about 4 amot and dofan akuma? The halakha should be, anytime you have a courtyard with a balcony around, you're good to go. You either have dofan akuma, if the balcony is less wide than 4 amot, and even if it's more wide, you still have the piat tikra, the ledges, imaginary wall extending the edge of the balcony. According to Abaye, the Mishnah clearly says that if it's wider than 4 amot, it's pasul, which indicates that this whole ledge thing is not a thing. So says the Gemara, there is a question they asked on Abaye, and Rava genuinely answered for Abaye, right? His opponent says, no, that's not a question. Tirgema Rava Ali, but Abaye, he answered for Abaye, keshehishva et kiruyo. This is a case that you don't have a ledge, which means, normally speaking, when you have the schach, you have the balcony, and the width of the balcony is here, right? If this would be your balcony, right, at the edge of the balcony, you're laying the schach on top of here. So therefore, you have this whole ledge, this whole thickness of the balcony, which is now allowed to be assumed to come down. But if I fill in this area with my schach, that means my beams are ending here, and I'm dropping my schach here, which fills in the entire width of the balcony, then you have no ledge left to come down. So in that case, says Rava, is the case of our Mishnah. Because for the schach to be able to, for the walls rather, to be able to be assumed to come down, you need like a tefach, or depending on which mefarshim you go and how we deal with, but you need to have a ledge. You need to have a thickness to this, and if you don't have it because you filled it in with schach, then of course you don't have piat tikra yored v'sotem. So that's the way the Gemara answered this. Now, besura matnu lehashmata behailishna. We mentioned this before. Last time we had between Surah and Naharda. Here we have between Surah and Pumbedita, the two major yeshivot in Bavel. They debated how exactly this machloket was said over. What is exactly the machloket, Rava and Abaye? So what we learned so far, and we explained it as a chazara today, is how they had it in Surah. But Pumbedita matnu, in the yeshiva in Pumbedita, they had it a little bit different. They had it like this: Sichech al gabe achsadra. If you create your schach on top of achsadra, she'en lach psimin. The achsadra, the balcony, does not have poles holding it up. There's no lavud. Then according to everybody is pasul. Rava, Abaye, there's no such a thing as a shita of Abaye that holds this kasher. So what's the machloket Rava and Abaye? The machloket is when you do have the poles, and the poles are closer than 3 tfachim to one another, then there's machloket Rava and Abaye. Yesh la psimin. If you have the poles, then Abaye amar kshera, Amrinan lavud, Rava amar psula, lo amrinan lavud. Abaye says we do say lavud, Rava says we don't say lavud. Now you will ask the obvious question, we have never had someone that doesn't say lavud. Lavud is like halacha Moshe Misinai, we always say lavud, we thought. So how can you say Rava, who halacha is going to be like Rava always, aside from 6 scenarios in Shas, Rava and Abaye always halacha is like Rava. So this is very mashmauti, very important to know. So says the Gemara, Rava holds lo amrinan lavud. Why is it? The reason is because it's outside. You are saying lavud not for the inside but for outside of the beams. Again, the same thing that we said before. You have the beams of the achsadra holding the balcony. The balcony is creating a passage on the top and shaded area on the bottom, a protected area on the bottom, right? So it says, Rava, the beams that you have holding this up, you could say lavud for them to create a mechitza for the inside underneath the balcony area, but not for outside in the courtyard. Any time that you don't actually have a solid piece of wall, the imaginary walls, if they're made for inside, you cannot use them for outside. Now, what's the halacha? We have 2 different ways of saying Abaye v'Rava, right? The first way is the way they said it in Yeshiva of Surah, which means Abaye holds that we assume the ledge to come down. Rava says, no. But Rava agrees that if you have beams, then you could use it if they're lavud, right? According to that lashon, that would be the halacha. Rava would be halacha, right? The second language, which is the way the yeshiva of Pumbedita had it, that case, Rava would say is pasul, right? So we have a major halachic nafkamina. If I have a balcony that's held up with beams less than 3 tfachim apart from each other, is that kasher or pasul? According to the first lashon, it is kasher. According to the second lashon, it's pasul. So therefore, the Gemara sees a need to explain that halacha is like the first lashon, like the yeshiva in Surah. So says the Gemara, Lo amrina lavud vehilcheta kelish lakama. The halacha is like the first language. So, which means the Gemara just told us that if you have a balcony and a courtyard in the middle, and you have beams less than 3 tfachim from each other, you can make your sukkah in the courtyard, hazaku baruch, everything is good, right? That's what the Gemara said. So, speaking about that, story in the Gemara goes like this. Rav Ashi ashkechel Rav Kana. Rav Ashi found Rav Kana. Now, the 6th generation, at least of Amoraim, and Rav Kana, the legendary Rav Kana, is the student of Rav, right? He was a very, very sharp individual, one of the best Talmidim of Rav, that he had to run away from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, and he had an encounter with Rabbi Yochanan, which ended in his death. Actually, so this is not that Rav Kana. We have 6 Rav Kanas. According to Seder HaDorot, this is, of course, someone in the generation of Rav Ashi, which is the last generation of Amoraim. So it says, or the one before, maybe Rav Ashi is seeing Rav Kana, who seems to be senior to him. He sees Rav Kana, the kabesachich al gabe achsadra. He was creating a sukkah in the middle of the courtyard, laying the schach on top of the balcony, right? So says the Gemara, it had no psimin, no beams. So you have no walls, and seemingly he's using the ledge, right? So that's an opportunity of learning experience for Rav Ashi. He says, wait a second. We don't paskin like that. That's Abaye, right? We don't paskin like that. Amale, lo tzavar more, hada amar Rava, you don't hold like Rava, halacha is like Rava. That yesh la psimin keshera, en la psimin psula. If you have psimin, it's kasher. If you have beams, if you don't have, it's pasul. So, instead of answering him, Rav Kana took him around to show him that there was actually a piece of wall that he had missed, right? A picture is worth 1,000 words. So he took him around. He saw that there are the 2 walls that he had seen of the sukkah. And then there was a little 1 tefach sticking that you couldn't see from outside. And that was not the scenario that he was not relying on the ledges, he actually had shenayim keilchatam, 2 full walls, ushlishit afilu tefach, the third one also was there, just the third one was hard to see from the outside. Achvile nir'emi bifnim veshavemi bachutz, that from outside you couldn't see it, but inside you saw that 1 tefach wall sticking in, inami, or either nir'emi bachutz veshavemi bifnim, right, that it was from outside the 1 tefach, and inside was shaveh. This becomes a question. Rashi says, basically you had your L shape, and then at the end was sticking out 1 tefach, but this is all underneath the achsadra, so it would be kasher. Tosafot says, like, how does that work? If you have a tefach that sticks out instead of sticking in from the L, that should be a problem. Rabbeinu Peretz asks the same question, and he answers that this is not a regular case. It becomes a little more complicated how to understand the answer of the Rishonim, but nevertheless, you have, the case of the Gemara is, you have 2 full walls and a third one small, which was not visible to the onlooker immediately unless you went around. So says the Gemara, Tana, Pesel hayotze min ha-sukkah nidon ke-sukkah. If you have schach kasher that sticks out of the sukkah, it's considered like sukkah itself. Now, the Gemara is going to go, I want everyone to pay full attention to this because we're going to go through it quickly. There are 4 different ways that the Gemara is going to understand this, and we're going to explain each one of them and how it works with the language of this Braita. So the Braita is pesel, which is another word for schach kasher, right? If you have schach kasher, that's sticking out of the sukkah, you could sit underneath it and it's kasher. That's what it seems like, right? Now, what does that mean exactly? So says the Gemara, my pesel hayotze min sukkah. What's the scenario over here? So Amar Ula says, kanim hayotzim la'achorei sukkah. If you have beams that are sticking out of the sukkah from the back, so you have the 3 of your U shape or chet shape, and the back wall, the schach is protruding outside in the back of the sukkah. And that is considered kasher. So what's the obvious question on that? Where are your walls? Right? If I have a sukkah that ends over here, right? If my sukkah, if this is the wall, this is inside the sukkah, even if my schach sticks out over here, if I sit underneath it, there is only 1 wall. Right? Where are your walls here? So the Gemara says, no, you do have walls, right? It's not just the schach that's sticking out, but Ula says, no, the walls also are sticking outside from the back as well. So says the Gemara, V'haba'inan shalosh lefanot. We need 3 walls. B'deika. It's not just the schach that's sticking out, but also the 2 side walls were long walls that are sticking out from the 2 sides. Then you have that. Okay. So says the Gemara, V'haba'inan hechsher sukkah. We need a shiur of 7 by 7 tfachim, because this is nothing to do with the sukkah, the actual sukkah. This is its own sukkah. It's in the back. So you need 7 by 7 tfachim. You can't just be a little bit sticking out and you're, standing there to eat. The Gemara says, no, but the Ika, we have 7 by 7. We have it. We need more shade than sun. The Gemara says, no problem. We have that too. We have everything. We have 3 walls. We have schach kasher. We have silata meruba mechamata. We have everything. You asked it, we got it. Says the Gemara, wait a second. If that's the case, remember, what's the chidush? Chazak u'baruch. So you have 2 sukkahs. The Gemara says, no. Ma'u detema, again, this is not a foreign concept for us by now. Ma'u detema, ho'il v'legavai avidi. Every single one of these 3 walls are made for inside the actual sukkah. They're just protruding outside, they're too long, right? The middle wall for sure is made for the actual sukkah. And even the other 2 are sticking out because you didn't find short enough of a board, so you're just sticking out. And your schach happens to stick out. Everything is made for the inside, but you just happen to have a byproduct of a small sukkah behind your sukkah. Who says those walls that are made for inside could be used for outside? And that's the chiddush, that when you have actual walls, we don't care where they were made for. that's good. You could use it as long as you have 3 walls and a shiur of 7 by 7 and a schach kasher, you're good to go. Says the Gemara, Kamash Malan.
Why did we need that? We just discussed that it doesn't matter where the wall was made from. On the porch example, the halacha is, you've got the
Yeah, but that does not mean that the Hava Amina is not there when Ula is explaining the Braita. Right? Now, the other 3 may not have liked this because of your question. Right? Because that's too simple. But the Hava Amina is always there, that the Braita needed to say this because it's not spelled out in any of these cases, in all of the cases that we discussed. It's a Hava Amina that's answered afterwards, right? So here, the Gemara says, that's Ula. Rab of Rav Yosef, Amri Tarbahu.
If there's one side completely open, right? We're talking about there's a full wall here and there's 2 tiny, like 1 tefach coming out. That's where our 3 walls are, right? Is that the case here?
Yeah,
Right, okay.
from the back.
Yeah,
Oh, tefach or more.
That's open. When the sun is here, I mean, there's total sun in that sukkah, right? At a certain time of day. So would we only go by, there's more shade than sun?
That's correct, because otherwise, if you have a massive sukkah and you're sitting by the edge of the sukkah and the sun is against you, you'll have the same question,
Right.
right? So says the Gemara, Rabbi of Rabbi Yosef Amri Tarbahu. Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef both say, Hacha beikanim hayotzim lifnim min sukkah. This is not the back of the sukkah. This is the entrance of the sukkah. So you have a full sukkah, 3 walls, right? But at the end of the sukkah, there is a protruding area that is extra, extending beyond the walls, but not necessarily beyond all walls, because that would be for sure a problem, right? So in other words, if you have the sukkah that ends, for instance, if this is your sukkah, imagine this whole thing is your sukkah, right? And this is your schach. There is schach sticking out over here. Now, obviously, that would be pasul if you sit underneath this, right? Because there are no walls anymore. But one of the walls is extended where you're sitting, right? One wall. There's schach and there's one wall, but this one wall is not a wall in abstract, is part of my larger sukkah. So maybe the halakha would see this as the sukkah extending over, because even in a place that I'm sitting beneath this schach here, sticking out, I am still part of this sukkah that has 3 walls. And I'm part of it because this wall extends, at least one of the walls extends. So it says, Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef says the Gemara, they both say, in the entrance side of the sukkah, one of the walls is extended forward. What's the Hava Amina? Why would you think that is pasul? Because I would have thought, it doesn't have 3 walls of its own. Kamash Malan, it is still kasher because it's part of the larger sukkah, extended halachically with 1 wall and the schach. That's the second way of understanding this Braita. The third way is Rabba Bar Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Bar Chana was one of the major Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan, and he says in the name of his Rebbe, Lo nitzlecha ela lesukkah sherubah silatah merubah michamata. You have a regular sukkah, nothing is sticking out. Imagine a regular sukkah, large sukkah, right? And you have part of the schach that is not good. You put one of the mats that you put up there. It's not as one of those like cheapo ones that the shade is not more than the sun. So that schach is not kasher, right? You have a schach, but your schach is pasul. So I would have thought maybe that because the schach is pasul, right? A small part of the sukkah is the schach is not more shade than sun. Mahu de tema, maybe you would have thought tipasel behach purta. Maybe you would have thought that this should be considered like it's not there, the schach, and then it would be considered like avir, and it would be posel the whole sukkah, right? Says the Gemara, kamash malan. the Kamash Palan is, no, the sukkah is still kasher, but just don't sit underneath that area, right? Now the Gemara says, but the bomb kasha on this is, wait a second, Uma Yotzeh. When it says the schach that is coming out of the sukkah, this is not coming out. You're telling me that nothing is coming out. The Gemara says, no, mehechsher sukkah. It means a schach that is out of the box from the halachot of schach. Right? The schach is yotzeh, is not kasher. Rabbi Oshaya, the fourth and the final pshat is Rabbi Oshaya Amar lo nisrecha ela leschach pasul. We're talking about a schach pasul, like mamash schach pasul, right? Pachot mishelosha, less than 3 tfachim of schach pasul. You have some metal scraps on top of your sukkah, schach pasul, and it's a sukkah ketana. It's a small sukkah 7 by 7. You have less than 3 tfachim of schach pasul, and the Gemara says, "Uma yotze." What's yotze? It's not coming out. Nothing is coming out. It says the Gemara yotze mitorat sukkah. It's bichlal not schach kasher. It says similar to the previous one. The Gemara asks a powerful question here. The Gemara says, wait a second. Matkif la Rav Hoshaya. Rav Hoshaya is asking Rav Oshaya, right? Lo yehe ela avir. So wait a second. Which one is more chamur? Having air, nothing, or having schach pasul? Having air, right? Doing nothing, being bored and doing nothing in life is worse than doing something bad sometimes. Right? Now, just not to have anything to do, hashkafically also is that people who suffer from boredom, like they'll never get anywhere. Now some people say, oh, at least they're doing something. If they're doing something now, even if it's not 100%, they're not finishing Shas, but if they're doers, at some point they're going to get to finish Shas as well. Anyhow, so Avir is worse usually than Schach Pasul. And yet, says the Gemara, if it would be Avir, if this less than 3 Tfachim would be just air, would the Sukkah be kasher? Yes? Yes. So why do you have to tell me that this you put metal scraps, Schach Pasul, is kasher? Of course, I know it's kasher. Even if it would be air, it would be kasher. Says the Gemara, answer is, Amale, Rav Abba, Ze mistaref yeshanim, Ze mistaref ve'en yeshanim tachtav. Yes, you're correct. Both of them are mistaref. The sukkah is kasher. But you know what the difference is? When you have avir, your sukkah is kasher, but you can't stand under underneath that area. That is avir. But when you have a schach pasul that's mistaref, then the whole sukkah is kasher. So it's better than just having avir, which prompts a question from the Gemara. It says, wait a second, do we have anything that is mistaref, but it itself is not kasher? How can you add it up to make it a real sukkah that you can sleep underneath it when it's not kasher? Where in Shas do you find a concept like this, that something could be considered part of your hechsher, and it itself is not kasher? Says the Gemara, no, we have it. Do we have such a thing? The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elyashiv. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elyashiv said, yes, we do have it. Tit hanaruk yochiach shemistaref la-40 se'ah ve'hatovel bo lo alta lo tvila. Tit hanaruk is a mud that is very watery enough that you could pour it from a kli to another kli. So if you have a mikveh that a little bit of it is titan aruk on the bottom, and together with the titan aruk and the water in the mikveh, you have 40 sa. 40 sa is the minimum quantity you need for the water of the mikveh, and if you have titan aruk, part of that, it's good. But if you have a mikveh made out of titan aruk, of course it's not good, right? So you have something that in itself is pasul for mikveh, but it could be added up to get your mikveh up to 40 amot, 40 se'ah, and therefore it will be kasher. Here is the same thing. That schach pasul by itself is pasul, but it could give you, if it's less than 3 tfachim, it could give you a combination of that, and schach kasher could give you a minimum of schach of sukkah kasherah of 7 tfachim, that you could actually sleep even underneath the area that has the schach pasul. We'll start next Mishnah Be'ezrat Hashem tomorrow morning. Unbelievable.